Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about Uprooted by Naomi Novik.
I've actually got the cat with me this week. She has sat on my bed as I am also sitting on my bed to record this episode.
Delightful.
Just going to present the book to her and see what she thinks. No, she's ignoring it. Maybe she'll care later. Maybe she'll care once we've explained it to her.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will just put a disclaimer at the front of this episode. Life got in the way and I didn't finish the book. So I am quite excited to hear Eli and Em's thoughts on this book because, yeah.
Oh, it makes us massive hypocrites because one of the first things we want to say is don't listen to this episode unless you've read the book.
Yeah.
But we need Lottie and we love her, so we're going to give Lottie a pass.
It's fine.
There's so many cool things with the perspectives and stuff where you think you know what's happening and the viewpoint character thinks she knows what's happening and she doesn't actually know what's happening, and all of those reveals are so good that I don't want to
they're so deftly done.
Yeah. So what would your guys' terrible summary of this book be?
Kidnapping going terribly, realizes local dragon.
Trees have feelings too, I guess.
that is
In fantasy Poland, trees eat you.
Yes.
Oh god. So I guess, do one of you guys want to give an overview of what this book's about and kind of where it's set and just a background to it, sort of where it fits in the genres of books?
So it's fantasy, I would say, pretty firmly fantasy, right? You know, there's magic and it's set in sort of what I think is supposed to be fantasy Poland, and then there's also fantasy Russia across the border, and in between them is this massive wood, and the wood is, from what we learn in the sort of from the viewpoint character, this wood is evil and
it eats people
and it sends people mad and it gives crops blight, and you don't go into the wood if you know what's good for you. And they also have this system where there's lords of all of the sort of small areas, and the lord of the area that our protagonist Agnieszka is from, their lord is also happens to be the most powerful wizard in the land, and he's known as the Dragon. And every 10 years, he takes a girl from his lands of 17 to go and be in the tower with him for 10 years, and then she is released, and she sort of is different somehow. It's a very like the Fae take you, and you come back changed sort of thing. And she doesn't want to stay in the valley like everyone else does, and she goes away and she goes out into the wider world. And the setup for the plot is that Agnieszka and her best friend Kasia are dragon-born girls, in the sense that they were born in a year which means that they will be 17 in a choosing year. So they are two of the girls who might get chosen to go and be in the Dragon's Tower. And he always takes the best girls, the smartest or the brightest or the best at dancing. And Agnieszka's best friend Kasia is all of these things. And so they've basically always known that she's going to be taken away. And so that's the setup for the start of the book, except Agnieszka turns out to have magic, and so the dragon has to take her because magic people have to be taught. That's part of the laws.
Which she doesn't know at the time. So the whole choosing setup is done extremely well. It's a very good book opening. But yeah, there's this whole he's working his way down the line and they're really scared, and she's holding Kasia's hand even though she's not supposed to, and it's all very tense and dramatic, and he almost takes Kasia, and then he kind of squints at her what the f***, and then, but he doesn't explain
Agnieszka,
that's why he's picked her. Yeah, he doesn't explain that's why he's picked Agnieszka. He's just weird and cryptic and creepy about it, so she doesn't know.
And he's trying to teach her magic later, but she thinks that he's casting magic on her. She doesn't realise that
he doesn't explain that's what he's doing either. It's you're a third of the way through the book.
So what would you classify the magic in this, I guess the magic system in this book? Is it hard magic or soft magic? I say it's more.
I'll be real with you, Chief. I've never really understood the difference.
That's
not really how my brain tends to classify them.
Yeah, how would you describe the difference?
So I think hard magic has rules. So Brandon Sanson's magic is hard magic because it's got rules and a defined system, and then soft magic is less of a system or less of a. I say science behind it. That's the wrong word, but less rules-based.
I don't know. I would argue that there's both. Because I think what the dragon does is very hard. He's determined that there have to be rules, and there's you've got to have the right ingredients, and you've got to say the right words at the right time, and you can do the scientific method at it to like create better spells, right?
Yeah.
And Agnieszka, when she kind of comes into it and sort of starts to get the hang of how it works for her, it's very soft magic. It's very like, I need to, my intent matters more than like any sort of technical aspect, and it should be intuitive, and it should be reactive, and it should be, it'll depend on the needs of the vagaries of the moment exactly how you get where you're going. There's a lovely metaphor.
You do exactly the same motions twice in two different states of mind, you'll get different results. But that's not how it works for the dragon. So it's sort of this interesting thing where it doesn't seem to be fixed as to how it works for different people.
Yeah.
And everybody's magic is a little bit different.
I think I got to that bit in the book where it was like explaining that.
Yeah, I was saying this earlier when we were talking about it. It's like the dragon's magic is very much like, his magic is often contrasted with Agnieszka's because we see them doing magic together the most often. And it's like his is like he's building something like an engineer, and hers is like she's growing something like a gardener, or like, picking her way through a forest is how she often describes it. Like this book is full of metaphor when Agnieszka's describing her magic.
One of the things that really struck me actually when I was talking about it with Eli earlier was the like, if we're talking hard and soft magic again, but having both, it reminds me quite a lot of Rivers of London.
Right.
Because the wizard magic in Rivers of London is like, it's Newtonian practice. That's the whole setup, is that like Newton codified the rules of the scientific method and then also codified scientifically like how you do magic.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, there are these powers in the world, like the rivers, that like it's all very intuitive and not quite belief-based, but it's a lot more just kind of, it works because I say so, But the thing that really struck me was when Agnieszka's describing how the dragon's magic feels to her, and it's like, it's mechanical. It's her magic is the water and his is the water wheel kind of situation. It reminds me very much of how Peter, the main viewpoint character of Rivers of London, describes his boss's magic. Okay. You get these like really intricate descriptions of feeling like you're standing in front of this incredible, like the most complex piece of clockwork machinery you've ever seen. And you can tell that it's really powerful and dangerous, but you have no idea how it works.
Okay.
And like, that was the thing that made me think of.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely remember getting to that bit in the book, and it was, and picking up on that. And I thought it was quite an interesting, like having those two contrasts of one where it's very rigid and the other one where it's much more connected to your intent.
And I think it's quite interesting as well because you get the sense that the dragon's magic is more a hard magic system, but Agnieszka doesn't really understand the rules. Like she can kind of see why he's doing it, but it doesn't work for her. So she doesn't really tell us what the rules are. And so we kind of get the sense that the dragon is very into the rules and he's very frustrated when other people don't get them. But at the same time, we don't know what they are. So you still get that kind of, and it's very, the whole narrative is very fairy tale. It's very, there was a man and he had 3 sons, so that it's more that kind of magic system that we get most of the time.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because Kasia being the most beautiful and the brightest and the funniest and the cleverest. And then the break in that fairy tale is when he sort of frowns and realizes that Agnieszka has magic and therefore he has to take her. And that's the first like departure from what you expect to happen and the sort of turning the narrative on its head a little bit.
I felt like there was a lot of that in this novel, and some of it was to do with the fact that you can tell Sleeping Beauty is here and informing everything that's going on, but at the same time it's very much not Sleeping Beauty. Like the river being called the Spindle, and there being, the wood being dangerous, there being a tower, and there is technically a princess in the tower, it turns out. And like this impenetrable barrier of plant life that will absolutely destroy you if you're not careful. But at the same time, it's not Sleeping Beauty in any, like, the narrative beats are not Sleeping Beauty, the message is not Sleeping Beauty. The prince definitely isn't there to save anyone. Well, he's there to save his mother, but
But he was only a child when his mother was stopped being there for him. So it's sort of like what he's really trying to rescue is not the idea of his mother, and that kind of comes back around when the mother reappears, sort of. Yeah.
So there's a repeated thing where like people get kidnapped by the wood. That's a thing, and it's the idea
get eaten.
Most people just accept you can't get people back from the wood, but that's kind of one of the first. Well, no, we already know that Agnieszka's got something else going on. But like the first moment where you really understand how powerful that is because everybody has said forever and ever, oh, somebody gets taken by the wood, you don't get them back. She gets them back. And it's very good.
But then, of course, that isn't trusted. You know, so the setup is that Kasia gets taken by the wood, long into. So first of all, Agnieszka gets taken into the castle, and she's into the dragon's tower, and she realizes she's magic, and she learns a few things, like a handful of things. And then, while the dragon has been called away to deal with an emergency elsewhere, that we later realize was probably a distraction set up by the wood makes an attack on Agnieszka's home village of Dvernik. And she is the only one in the tower, and so she has to answer the call. And it's sort of like she goes back only like a month or so after having been taken away from the village unexpectedly, because everyone thought Kasia was the one who was going to be taken. And she's already so changed, but she saves her village and so on and so forth. But then a little bit after that, Kasia is taken by the wood, and like Kasia's the person that Agnieszka loves more than anyone else in the world. They are closer than sisters, so on and so forth. And so she goes to save her, and nobody thinks she could do it, but she does it. And eventually they do also manage to drive out the corruption of the woods, but a huge driving force of the story is this was thought to be impossible. And once it's become clear that it is possible, the question arises of, well, why don't we go in and try and save the queen who was taken 20 years ago? Except that the longer somebody is trapped in the woods, the less of them there will be left to save. And Kasia was only in there for a few hours. The queen has been in there for 20 years. You can see why this is a very bad idea, but lots of very powerful people want to make it so. And that's like sort of part of the main conflict.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what do you kind of think of Agnieszka as a protagonist?
I really like her.
Yeah, I like her very much.
And she's great. I love it. It's a
she's
really
very funny, you know?
She's very funny. And she's just so like, I tell you, in some ways, she almost reminds me a little bit of Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle. And she's just I'm not going to be, she is cowed by the dragon a bit, but she is like, I'm just going to be rude. I'm going to continue to be like rude and gross and like, you know, just whatever at him. And like, there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm going to lean into it. You know, I really like the sort of repeated thing of her just being like a mess, you know? Kasia's the special one, and she's the one that like, she's always good at she's good at finding things in the forest, you know? She's good at foraging. That's kind of her thing. But she's always messy. She doesn't really know how to cook all that well. All this, she's not that interested in like dressing up fancy and, you know, all of this stuff. And I really enjoy how, like, she feels like a real person. You know, like, if this was a normal fairy tale, you would be like, Kasia would be the hero. And, you know, she'd have all these... She'd be kind of OP for the setting, you know?
And that is how Agnieszka thinks of her, you know? She often is comparing herself to what Kasia would do in her place, or what she thinks Kasia would do in her place.
Yeah. And then Kasia does end up with like literal like tree-based superpowers, so she is like super OP, but she's still not the protagonist.
I tell you who Agnieszka reminds me of, both Tiffany Aching and Sam Vimes.
Ooh, yeah, I can see both of those. Yeah.
So like the young witch trying to protect her domain, and also Sam Vimes, who's like the rest of the world moves in circles and he moves in a straight line.
Yeah.
Like the way that she conceives of magic and how magic should be used or could be used is so just a completely different paradigm to how the dragon thinks of it, and his way is kind of the accepted way.
And what do you think about the dragon as a character? Like his setup, and then what you find out about him, I guess, through the book.
Oh, he's such a head.
God forgive me, I am attracted to a fictional man again.
Oh, no, I mean, I grow to like him, but I don't find him attractive. Yeah,
this is a book in which I root for the straights, which Naomi Novik is one of the few writers I think who could do that, but...
Yeah, I mean, I root for them, for sure. I like I enjoy their relationship, particularly since it very much becomes a, like, she's just bullying him. She's just, like... And he's trying to bully her because he's feeling insecure, and she's just like...
But she sees
right
hilarious.
Through it. Yeah. No, it's really interesting because I like the contrast of them.
Like, he is older than her in the sense of, like, he still looks like a young man. Like, but the fact that this age difference is made up for by him just having, like, zero social skills.
Just in his tower.
He has political skills, but he doesn't know how to talk to another person. And that is actually kind of thematically relevant, because one of the things that's a mechanic in this book is that the people who have grown up in the valley, near the woods, are sort of connected to it, and in a way that makes them not want to leave. Like, any sane person would be like, oh, the woods nearby me is trying to eat me and my entire village. I should move to a place that's not this. But people don't. And the wizard understands this, and the dragon understands this, and he doesn't form connections with the people there. He doesn't drink from the water of the river. He doesn't go and celebrate their harvest festivals with them. And part of, I think that ties into why he's not good at, like, talking to regular people.
Yeah.
Because, that's something he's actively been trying to avoid so that the wood doesn't get its hooks in him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yeah. And he's, like, been, actively avoiding human connection in a way that, like, Agnieszka just can't. Like, just doesn't work for her at all. And I think it's really interesting how that is responsible for a lot of the misconceptions that they have about each other. Like, so everybody in the village and in the valley has kind of been assuming that the reason that the dragon takes women is because he wants, this is the polite way of putting it,
a bang maid.
Yeah.
He wants a bang maid.
Yeah. For horrible sexual reasons, that he's just taking people.
Well, for reasons of wanting someone who will keep house for him and also sleep with him.
But, like, it just hasn't occurred to him at all, because he's, like, that disconnected from human society that it just doesn't occur to him that they would just assume that he's been raping all these women. And that comes out about halfway through the book, that's what they assume.
And he's just baffled and horrified.
The mechanic of, like, getting people from the wood is really great, because it requires, like, that full level of, like, you know everything about another person, even the most awful things. It's almost drift compatibility, but, like, not, like...
It's the mortifying ordeal of being known.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly it. So he sees the fact that, like, that's what they were afraid of this whole time, and how the relationship between, like, chosen and not chosen, like Kasia and Agnieszka, and how they thought about each other. How there were these horrible twists in their connection because of, like, what they were expecting to happen when the dragon came. And he's just, like, completely blown away by this. He had no idea. And, like, to us, looking at it, you're like, how are you this stupid? But I think it serves very well as a kind of demonstration of, like, how far he's succeeded at disconnecting himself.
And it's interesting thinking about, like, this thing that people thought was impossible of, like, rescuing people from the woods. It depends entirely on that connection that he has been avoiding. So when Kasia is being rescued from the woods by Agnieszka, how they do it is basically Agnieszka and the dragon cast this spell that essentially just reveals truth. It just, you can't... It's like Zone of Truth, essentially, but in a very visual and metaphorical way. And so during the process of saving Kasia from, like, the woods that's taken root inside her, essentially, she and Agnieszka see all of the insecurities that they have about each other and the secret hatreds and jealousies and, all of the bottled up resentment that they have for each other, because they always assumed that Kasia was going to be the one who was taken, and that's a really complicated thing. And the dragon could not have done any of that. It's not just that Agnieszka's magic is different than his, it's that she is able to have this connection with the other people. That he has spent so long avoiding. And you see him at the end of the book coming to terms with the fact that that's actually something that's good and he should have in his life. And that it's not going to... Well, especially once the wood's evil has been sort of done away with, or the threat posed by the wood is no longer in play. There's no danger in it. And you see him beginning to make peace with the idea of putting down roots somewhere.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, because I got to the point in the book where they're going into the wood to find the queen. Some
really good horror in that section.
Yeah, but it's not only that, it's just the concept of a scary wood. Like, it is like a very, like you say, a fairy tale. It's
a very archetypical thing.
Yeah. What did you guys think of that scene? Because you are right, it is very horror. It is a horror. It doesn't shy away from that.
I think my favourite moment of that whole scene is when they come across... So there's mention earlier that the wood just, like, ate an entire village. Like, there used to be a village where there's now just wood. And they come across what's left of that village, and it's treated as this very serious and dangerous thing, where they come across, like, it's like a barn that looks like a sort of a scary face with its windows and its door. And they realise that this is what's left of... I think it's Polnia. No, Polnia is the country. I forget what the name of the town is. Porshna, probably. And they're just like, we do not ride your horses through what's left of the market square. We go around. Doesn't matter how far away, how far a detour this takes us. We will not go through And it's like, well, why? It's just buildings and, but no, it's like the ghost of a town. And I just thought that was really sort of, it's never made clear what the thing that they're trying to avoid happening to them is by not going through the town. But it's clear that it's something so awful that they don't even want to say it.
Weirdly, the thing for me is that, I don't read a lot of horror, and I think when things get a bit like that, I tend to skim a little. But for me, the thing that struck me most about that voyage was actually the sort of the human horror of it.
Oh, I mean, that's always the most potent thing, yeah.
Yeah, the fact that, the prince is willing to risk everybody's lives like that, and he doesn't give a shit.
Or not even risk, but spend. He knows full well that they're all going to die.
Yeah. And, the fact that they don't know that. Just the contrast between how Agnieszka and even the dragon are, taking this compared to what the prince and the other...
Yeah, the soldier's like, we're going on a quest, we're going to save the queen. And Agnieszka and the dragon are just there this is a suicide mission and we are only going along because it's better than letting you go alone.
Yeah.
I tell you what, this is another place where I think the politics really crash into the fairy tale genre, and I think that's something that's very interesting about this book in general, is that the kind of, okay, so in the valley, if everything is operating on fairly fairy tale logic, and you've got a wizard who's a dragon and a wood that eats people, and the chosen and the not chosen and all of this. And then sometimes people from the capital come along with their incomprehensible, ridiculous politics that doesn't give a about human life, or in a lot of ways human connection. They don't value it the way that Agnieszka does, and you end up with this this kind of weird worlds meeting thing where people are just talking completely at cross purposes with each other.
Well, I guess it's a parallel to the woods, isn't it? It's the foil to the woods, is the machine of politics that doesn't care and only wants to have an excuse to go to war with Roger, and and that is the foil to the woods. It's that's the human version of something that's become corrupted, and and it maybe doesn't have magic to do it, but it can be just as insidious. And you see this prince who wants to go and rescue his mother. Our first introduction to him, and we're going to time box this discussion, our first introduction to him is him doing an attempted sexual assault on Agnieszka while she's in the dragon's tower, because he wants to get one over on the dragon. He also thinks the dragon takes these girls to be his bangmaids, and he thinks that he's cuckolding the dragon by hitting on and trying to sleep with the girl that he's taken. Agnieszka does a magic at him and beats him unconscious with a silver tray, which is great. We love to see it. But this then creates a situation where it's
Can I say how much I enjoy the fact that the magic she does, because it's the only magic she knows at that point, is the make my dress fancy.
And that's the point at which she realises that it's her magic and not the dragon's as well.
Yeah. And then she hits him with a tray. This was going back to why we like Agnieszka as a protagonist. I really like the fact that every time she has to solve a problem, she uses stuff that we know she already has. She's limited in what she's got, right? So she knows the dress spell, and she knows how to hit people with blunt objects. And the same holds true of when she goes to to rescue her village. She knows what some of the potions in the dragon's lab do, so she takes those.
Yep.
And she uses the make my dress fancy spell to make people listen to her, so they'll actually take her to her village. And it's all she never has skills that you don't know about. She never manifests these.
She uses the fancy dress to give money, essentially. There's a couple who are very, very poor, and she leaves her fancy dress for them. Because I don't understand how the cantrips work, because surely you can just create arbitrary amounts of wealth with that spell? Is that ever addressed? I guess there's only so much.
I do wonder somehow, that spell is really funny to me, because I wonder if it's not, there's a certain amount of, it wouldn't occur to the dragon, or possibly anybody else who's ever, been taught that spell, that fancy clothes are money. It just wouldn't, because literally, the reason he teaches it to her is because he's sick of her looking filthy. He's such a brat. He's just I'll make her look fancy, and then...
So, one of the things is that the Falcon says to Agnieszka so the Falcon is a court magician who turns up with the prince. And one of the things he says to Agnieszka is oh, you don't have to stay here. You could go to court, and then the king would give you a load of money because he needs to keep the wizards on his good side. And so, all the people who could do magic already get lives of luxury. They would never have to think about that kind of thing. And so it's Agnieszka... I think she is probably the first time that one of the girls that the dragon has taken has been magical, because otherwise this situation would have come up before. So she's probably one of the first people to get magic in that country in a long time who wasn't immediately thrown into privilege as a result. And that probably impacts massively how she approaches her situations.
Yeah. But yeah, I like the fact that, you know, she never gets put in a situation and it suddenly turns out that, you know, like she was good at politics the whole time, or, you know, she only ever has the skills that we know her to have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's no
and I
Deus
really
Ex.
like how that affects the problem solving of it. And, you know, things that are strengths in one situation are flaws in another. You know, and I really like that about the way character and plot kind of interweave in this. We were talking about the prince. Do we remember why we were talking about
the point I was leading towards is that he is kind of the combination of, to me, the politics as a corrosive force and the woods as a corrosive force, because he doesn't actually get directly influenced by the woods. He doesn't get actively corrupted by it, but he is influenced by it throughout basically his entire life, because his mother was essentially stolen by the woods in order to start a war between the two neighbouring countries, because the more fighting they do, the weaker they are, and the more the woods can take over their territory. And so his entire life has been dictated by the will of the woods. And while he never actually gets actively corrupted by it, he's obviously very clearly adept at the politics, and his political desires also drive him to do awful things, like they lead to the death of his brother. Who is the older sibling, because he wants the throne. Like the younger brother, this prince, wants the throne. Yeah. So those as two corrupting forces sort of being united in this one character of the prince.
I tell you what, I think it's really interesting that you should say that as well, because I think the other thing that we later find out that the woods and the prince have in common is that this is the result of trauma. Like, it's you know, the woods is a corrupting influence, but it's specifically his trauma response to my parents. My mum was stolen by the wood and I never saw her again, is to become very good at politicking and to become very good at bending other people's lives without thinking about the cost and not thinking of other people as people. That's how he's dealt with it.
Yes. So shall we get into spoilers?
Yes.
We are nearly half an hour into this podcast episode, so I think we can get into spoilers.
Yes.
We're going to talk about what the woods is and how it came to be. And if you haven't read this book and you've been listening so far, this is the point at which you should stop listening and go read the book.
And go read it.
Because we're about to talk about something that will change the entire way you look at this book. And you should read it unspoiled, at least, the first time. So, with that said, do we want to, do you want to talk about how the woods happened?
Oh, yeah, the woods supervillain origin story. Now, I must admit, I read this. You know how sometimes you're enjoying a book so much that you read it very fast because you want to know what happens, and then it turns out that you don't actually remember what happens because you read it too fast.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, like, essentially, the sort of, I guess about halfway through the book, you find out that the Wizard's Tower, like under the Wizard's Tower, is like
remnants,
the tomb of the previous kings of this valley, kind of
sort of lost civilization.
The first civilization that got eaten by the wood, basically. And it turns out that the reason they got eaten by the wood is because their king married one of the. So we've got Ents, basically.
Yeah, the wood people.
And the king married one of them.
And they're sort of like, oh, you know who they're like? They're like in the episode of Doctor Who, where it's the end of the world, the Ninth Doctor.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
With the repeated something appearance of Meme and the Toxic. And anyway, there's tree people in that, and that's how I imagine these people. Basically, they are sort of humanoid, but they are also trees somehow. Sort of.
Yeah, so there's a marriage. We assume a love match, but possibly political, because we're kind of getting all of this via sort of
third-hand trauma.
Yeah, it's kind of we're having is it one of the summonings? I feel like it's happening during one of the times they're casting truth.
It's Agnieszka gets locked into a heart tree right at the end of the book. They've gone to the heart of the wood to try and defeat it once and for all. She gets pushed into a tree and it closes around her, and basically then she is and the heart tree that she gets pushed into is what's left of one of the wood people, the sister of who is now the Queen of the Woods. So who became a tree long ago, but the Queen of the Woods is still around and causing havoc, and that's who the sort of antagonist has been all this time.
But yeah, they essentially the humans walled her up with the king when he died.
Yeah, because they never trusted her, they didn't understand her, and they locked her somewhere she couldn't grow, and she couldn't go back to be with her people, and she was trapped in stone forever. Except she got out eventually.
And she got out basically to find that the people were cutting down. The rest of her people had basically had decided to become trees about it, which I love as a life option.
Yeah. Yeah, they've done the equivalent of going into the West, you know?
Yeah. Or even Ents, I think the whole, like, the thing with, like, they're hard to wake up because they've been thinking tree thoughts too long.
Yeah.
Yes. But this seems to be an active one-time choice on the part of the Wood People, which is, I guess, why I compare it to going into the West.
There's, like, the world has changed. Yeah, no, you're right. I feel like the Ents becoming less people-y is also to do with the end of the Third Age and the
maybe, yeah.
Like, you're right, though. It's not so much presented as an active choice as part of a decline of the age rather than...
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a choice that they make because people have the valley now, basically. And they're like,
our time is over.
We don't want to fight them, so we're going to just become trees about it. And the Queen escapes just in time to find people chopping down those trees.
The trees that those people have become. And she goes on a roaring rampage of revenge that basically never ends. And that's where the woods came from. And she forgot how to be a tree. She forgot how to grow. She forgot how to... She would quite like to just go to sleep forever. But people keep trying to hurt her because she's hurt them in the past. And so it's basically this sort of cycle of abuse that gets resolved by Agnieszka seeing this wood woman and basically helping her to get the resolution that she needs. And she becomes a tree.
Which I love. There's this really beautiful moment where they're about to... So that Agnieszka and the dragon have gone into the wood for kind of what we think is the final time of the novel. It's there's the last gasp attempt at solving this.
Yeah, sort of do or die, you know, Hail Mary.
And they think that what they're going in to do is destroy the wood. They need to get as far in as they can and find the Queen and destroy her. But as they're right there, and Agnieszka is, you know, they're about to set it ablaze, and Agnieszka's like, this can't be right.
Yeah.
This can't be. I feel in my gut, I know this is the wrong solution, that this isn't just blasting it is not the answer. But she also at that point doesn't know what else to do because they don't have any means of like talking to it or any of this. And like the thing is, as somebody who's read Spinning Silver and a bunch of other like Naomi Novik, as a Naomi Novik reader, you go, that can't be the solution, right? This is a Naomi Novik book. The solution to this like intergenerational trauma is not going to be we light it on fire forever and ever. And that's correct. We do not, in fact, light it on fire forever and ever. The solution is, peace and reconciliation and
healing and
sometimes letting evil princes get their hearts torn out by trees. Sometimes that helps, I'm just saying.
So in between the prince going in to try and ride in to rescue his mother, the Queen, who is trapped in a tree in the middle of the woods, and the scenes we've just talked about, what happens is they rescue essentially the body of the Queen from inside the woods, and they bring her back, like, you know, she's basically just kind of not a person. She's just there. She's very empty. She very flat effect. She won't respond to anything. She doesn't seem to know where she is. She won't eat. She won't drink. And they bring her back to the main city to sort of be presented to the king. And in the meantime, the king has been trying to marry someone else, and the reappearance of his wife is extraordinarily inconvenient. And it's a whole political mess. But basically what happens is the wood has basically hijacked the Queen's body, and she is basically an avatar of the woods.
Yeah.
And she does a lot of violence. There is a siege at the Dragon's Tower that's like a really interesting sort of thing of like, well, if you did have magic, how would you use it in sort of combat? And like staged what's the word I'm looking for? Like pitched combat?
Yeah.
You know, they've got defenses and they're firing arrows and all sorts of things. Yeah, and the Wood Queen inhabiting the body of this queen who's been missing for 20 years kills her son by ripping his heart out. And it's you don't feel bad for him because he did try to rape Agnieszka early on, and he never really kind of redeemed himself from there. So yeah,
he had it coming. as to quote Chicago.
Yeah, he only had himself to blame.
Yes. As the prophet said.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are several instances of like people f***ing up throughout this book. So, I mean, one of the things that happens is Agnieszka pushes for the Wood Queen, the Queen, to be not like put to death, because if she gets put to death, Kasia will get put to death because Kasia is kind of the proof that somebody can be safe from the woods. So, if the Queen has to die, so does Kasia. And Agnieszka realizes right after she has basically thrown her lot in, basically cast the deciding vote that the Queen should live, she realizes something is very, very wrong. because the moment that she's decided that the queen should live is the moment where the woods actually reaches out and takes control of her, because now it's safe to do so and she won't be detected, that it won't be detected in her. And there's also the other person I'm thinking of who like up and isn't like punished forever for it is Kasia's mother, who, well, it's not even her. So what happens is Agnieszka tells Kasia's mother, who knows that Kasia was taken by the woods and knows that Agnieszka brought her out, but not that she was actually purged of her corruption. Agnieszka says, you can't tell anyone about this, because if they know that we brought her out of the woods, they will come with pitchforks and fire and like burn the tower to the ground, because it can't be done. And we're trying something that's never been tried before. But the news does get out, and because of that, that's why the whole plot is set into motion to go and rescue the queen from the woods, and the woods is then let loose into the capital to wreak lots of havoc. But yes.
Who would you fight in this book if you had to, like, punch one person?
Oh, the prince.
Yeah, the prince.
Obviously.
Yeah. I think I'd like to get a good hit in on the falcon as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's such a sleazeball. Although I love that thing that Kasia says at the end. So, yeah, we've had this horrible politicking magician who the dragon keeps insisting isn't evil. He's just, like, out for what he can get, pretty much. And you kind of, if you can manage him, you'll do all right, kind of, is the general vibe you get off of him. But there's a point at which, like, Kasia's writing a letter at the end to Agnieszka, like, he asked me to marry him the other day, because I assume for politics reasons. And I was like, I was tempted to say yes just to see him, like, flail about it.
Yeah.
And that's about the level that he ends up on, is they're just like, he's just ridiculous. Like, we know how to handle him now, and he's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And,
like, I don't think he deserves worse things happening to him, but I'd still like to get a slap in.
He gets exactly what he deserves and no more and no less in this book, I think. But he would be fun to punch.
Who would be the only human in the Muppets adaptation of this book?
So I don't think there's like this
dragon.
Is not a Muppets adaptation book. I don't. No, it's funnier if the brooding romantic lead is like Kermit or something. Come on.
But I'm just imagining Miss Piggy as Agnieszka and him trying to teach her magic and her getting like ridiculous fancy dresses.
I don't know. I'm kind of like, of all the Muppets that I think it should be, I think Gonzo. I know I cast Gonzo and everything, but like, or like Animal. I think just for the sheer like. There's a witch loose in my tower. No one knows what the witch is going to do next, least of all the witch. She's never had magic before. You know, it's very like, there is just so much of her just like accidentally causing chaos, and the dragon's just sitting there like, what is this gremlin doing here?
Like, who raised
what is even going through her head? yeah, pretty much. And it's very funny. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is not. Muppets adaptation is not what I do with this. I think I would Studio Ghibli it.
Yes, definitely.
If I was going to pick any, like, sort of iconic who would you get to adapt this, I think Studio Ghibli would do a very good job.
Definitely.
Like, classic Spirited Away era. Studio Ghibli, I think that would be a good. I don't know, I feel like, I mean, saying that, I know I say this every time we say, oh, Studio Ghibli could do this. I think the people who did Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea could also do it. I think they do a good line in plant-based magical forest situation. I think that would work out quite nicely.
Who would you cast in a live action adaptation, do you think?
This is the bit where my mild face blindness gets us all, and the fact that I don't know any celebrity names.
That's fair enough.
Just go for like characters from the MCU.
Do we think Aidan Turner could do the dragon? I feel like Richard Armitage could for sure do the dragon.
I was going to go Adrian Brody, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Or Richard Armitage, because I want to cast him in everything because I love him. But, you know.
I'm trying to think now who I'd get to do Agnieszka, because I want somebody who can do, like, feral chaos gremlin, you know? I want somebody who's like, I'm going to walk through the woods barefoot and get,
I would like the girl who plays Lyra in the TV show of His Dark Materials.
Yeah, she's a good actress.
She's a good feral
I think
child.
anyone who can do Lyra can do Agnieszka. Yeah. I think that's... You've got the feral chaos
Muppet.
Muppet
You get the girl who was in
energy.
the movie adaptation to play Kasia.
Oh my god, that's so perfect.
So yeah, combine adaptations into one wider adaptation.
You know how sometimes people talk about like casting like Elijah Wood and Daniel Radcliffe as each other and stuff?
Yes.
I'm thinking about whoever the female equivalent of that is. I think you need to get playing Kasia and thingy. You need them to like it to be almost entirely acting that they're at all different people and not...
Yeah, the difference between them. Mm-hmm.
Like, visually, they should be really similar. I think that could be really fun.
I'm just thinking of, like, Katy Perry and Zooey Deschanel are the two that I hear all the time being compared.
I feel like the Zooey Deschanel's, like, new girl character is, like, a very soft femme version of Agnieszka. She's got the, like... the you know, the kind of, like, clumsy, slightly messy, she means well, but everything's kind of chaotic.
Well, do you know what, actually, to the dragon, she's his manic pixie dream girl.
Oh, no!
But it's true, but like gremlin version.
Yeah.
Manic pixie dream gremlin.
I tell you what, it is, I think it is still, to me, it is it's just a fun variant on the Howl's Moving Castle thing. In that, like, yeah, it's just like, I invited this random gremlin into my tower, and she's just, like, causing chaos and, like, destroying all my stuff, and, like, I was not expecting this to happen. Somehow she's also a really powerful witch, but she doesn't seem to know. And, like, there's a lot of, like, fun parallels there. Apart from, like, he's very dark and brooding and not, like, a massive drama twink.
Yes.
In the way that Howl is.
Yeah, the dragon isn't dramatic. He's actually very, like, level-headed. But I guess it's just, like, he's just tired. He's just old and tired.
Yeah. He's just, like, very grumpy, and he's got that thing, I think, where he kind of... Like, he thinks everything he does is eminently reasonable and thus should be completely comprehensible to everybody around him. Mm-hmm. But actually, he's, like, completely insane.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just like... It's like, this is not how people behave. But he's just like, obviously, I am the most sane, rational person in the whole world, and thus everything I do is completely transparent to everybody. Meanwhile, there's this random girl, like, blowing up my kitchen. Thing. And, like... Yeah.
What do you think? Our darling Gothmog. Has she sat on the book yet, Eli?
She hasn't sat on the book. She left and now she's back. Gothmog, here is the book. What do you think of it? I'm ruffling the pages at her. Do you like it? She's more interested in my yarn, I'm afraid. There aren't cats in this book directly. I would say in sort of magic form, the dragon is kind of like, I mean, there is a dragon, so
the dragon is the most cat-like person in this book for sure.
You sure you don't want to read it, baby? You sure? look, it's very interesting. She's looking at it. She's not being offended by me shoving a book in her face. I think that's a good sign. Yeah, I mean,
you know, there's not really any crime, is there?
No, there's treason, which is not the same thing.
Treason doesn't count.
No,
Don't
treason
you realise
doesn't count.
It's just a story.
It's the same thing as stealing from a dragon isn't stealing. It's, you know, it's just noble.
It's societal good at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah. I tell you what, I feel like Agnieszka's ending is the kind of... It's not a cat ending exactly, but it's the kind of ending that a cat could appreciate. That was the one thing I wanted to say that we haven't talked about yet. Is I have never wanted to walk into
definitely.
a book and have the character's ending more than I do Agnieszka's at the end, where she's just like living feral in the woods and kind of gardening it and just taking care of it, and like she's just the mad woods lady.
And being also the village witch and healer to all the villages nearby. And so like she's a familiar face to everybody. She deliberately does the opposite of what the dragon did, of like trying not to put down roots.
Yeah.
And I love this bit where we were talking about like, is the becoming a tree like a choice that these tree people have made? And basically what it is that the heart trees that used to be these wood people put out fruits. And if you eat these fruits, you can, what is it, the phrase? It's like, it was described like there was an invitation there in that fruit too, that if you wanted to go and become a tree and dream a very long dream, you know, forever, you could. If that was, you know, it's sort of, you know, it's not suicide. It's, I'm done with this part of life. I'd like to be a tree now, I think.
Yeah. Which, like, it's the most relatable thing ever.
And there's a bit where Agnieszka's like, you know, maybe one day I would. Maybe one day I will do that, but not yet. I'm quite happy where I am right now. And I love that as a resolution where it's just like, yes, it's great. So the dragon has been off at court sorting out all the aftermath of the horrible mess and running away because he's worried that because of his commitment issues.
And also running away from like human connection and having feelings. And because, you know, he's like fallen in love with Agnieszka as well and he's terrified. And
she's just like, living her life down in the valley, doing good for the people and like tending to the forest and
like,
watching
it's a genuinely happy ending.
Yeah, it's already a happy ending.
Like if he had never come back, the book would have been like, that would have still been like one of the most blissful book endings I've ever like read. It still would have been one of the most satisfying, like, I want to live that actually book endings that I've ever read.
Yeah.
But
they're celebrating, it's the Harvest Festival, which the dragon never used to come to. Anyway, so they're not expecting him. But he does turn up, and it's like this thing where not only did he come back from where he could have run away forever and stayed at court forever, but he came back, and he came back to deliberately be more involved than he was before. And it's this really like lovely signifier of like, oh, she's had a real impact on his enjoyment of his own life, right? Because he's going to be making these connections, he's going to have a fuller life. Like,
it really hammers home as well how much of what was going on was not just a perspective thing, but about the stories that we tell about people and how they dehumanize them, right? Because it's a story he's been telling as well, but there's a thing she says halfway through where she's like, I could be angry with him because he was a person. Like, it didn't make sense before I lived in the tower, it didn't make sense to be angry at him for taking girls and like for how awful that was and how traumatizing and whatever. Because like, he's not a real person, he's the dragon. He's a wizard who lives in a tower and is mysterious, and he's not real. But now she's lived with him and she knows what he's like as a person and the fact that he is human, and that means that she can get angry with him, know? And like, he's worth getting angry at. But like, I think that the final moment really hammers home just like how much she sees him as a person, and that's like the first thing that they need to break, because everybody else is like, oh my god, the dragon's here, it's terrifying. And he's like ignoring all of them and just looking at her eating the magic tree fruit like, that's appalling. And she's like, it's delicious. And he's like, do you want to turn into a tree? Is that it? And she's like, not yet. Yeah. And they're just having this like banter that they've had this whole time. Like, not the whole time, but like, most of their dynamic has been him being like, you're gross. And she's being like, I love it though.
What is going on?
And everybody's just looking on like, what the is happening? And it's so good.
I realised we got the cat thoughts. We never actually gave it a rating.
Sorry, we got derailed.
I'm going to give it an 8 for the cat, because there isn't actually a cat, and there isn't actually a lot of crime. There is a lot of violence.
Yeah, she does like violence.
Yeah.
And she cares about aesthetics in a way that I think the dragon would also appreciate.
Yes.
It's like things to be like, fancy and yeah. I don't know. I still don't think it's enough. I would be much as I love it, I'm once again in the position of being like, I love this book much more than I think the cat would. Because for me, it's like 1 billion out of 10, and I'm going to read it every year for the rest of my life kind of thing.
Oh.
For the cat, I think there's not enough stabbing. My dude, she doesn't care about all this like adorable reconciliation, vibing with nature, turning into a tree shit. She wants to stab.
There is a lot of stabbing in the last third of the book. There is a lot of stabbing. Oh, there's the assassinations of the royal family.
Yeah, I guess. But it's not like fun stabbing. It's like slaughter stabbing. It's not the same.
That's true. It's not sneaky. Yeah. It's not sneaky stabbing. It's open rebellion stabbing.
It's not assassin stabbing. It's very much like...
Yeah.
That's fair enough. I could go for a lower rating.
Yeah, it's like the horrors of war stabbing.
I mean, I think we're probably going to have to wrap up because we are to time. I was just wondering what other, I say other literature, but like literature-based things have we been consuming in the past?
Is this is because you want to talk about the Wheel of Time TV show?
No. I mean, I'm just broadening it out because
that caveat was very. Can we?
I know exactly. To be honest, it's more because I haven't actually read any other books. So I thought
I was going to say I can't tell you what else I've read, but I can tell you which books are currently propping up my mic and pop filter, because that's as close as I've come to reading anything else this week. So I've got the first volume of Condor Heroes by Jin Young propping up my pop filter, and in between the little cardboard boxes that form my mic stand, I have The Big Over Easy by Jasper Fforde, which is like noir, but all the characters are nursery rhyme characters living in like parallel early noughties Britain, and it's really funny and I love it a lot. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Mostly I've been reading loads of specifications about different kinds of web authentication for work, so very, very boring. Like, I'm into it because I'm a nerd, but it's objectively very boring.
Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to push through book 10 of Wheel of Time, and I have been watching TV show, but there is a whole other podcast about it. If you want to go and not a whole other podcast, we have bonus episodes, just find them on just scroll through.
Well, by the time this one airs, those ones will have been out for a while, right? Because this is January.
The third one, because our third one, so we're doing one will have come out in November, one that will have come out in December, and then one that will come out in January. So a couple of episodes.
One's already out.
So yeah, one is already out as of recording.
At the time of recording this, one is already out.
So yeah, it's a fun time if you want to listen to me and two friends in the pod talk about Wheel of Time, because we love it. Go download those episodes and also check out series 1. If you're liking, the vibes, we have a whole other series you can binge listen to whilst commuting or not commuting, depending on if lockdown 69.0 happens.
My podcasting listen has gone down so much since. I don't. One of our housemates used to listen to a lot of podcasts and now doesn't, because he doesn't walk anywhere anymore. Yeah. He doesn't have any reason to walk anywhere, and I'm because I can't craft anymore because of stupid
things,
hand injuries. I don't have an excuse to podcast either. I need to get back to the physio about that. This is not relevant. This is not relevant to anything. All you need to know is I f***ed up my hand in a freak piano accident.
Basically, we're all old and falling apart. I can't believe you had a freak piano accident that wasn't a piano falling on you.
I know, right? It's the most boring. It's literally I played it too angrily without warming up, and now it's
You gotta be careful, man. That Rachmaninoff, he'll get you.
It was Ludovico Einaudi with the he clearly has bigger hands than I do. Anyway,
if any listeners have got any tips of how to improve hand pain from just RSI,
I've got my
email us.
I've got my list of physio instructions, but it's
it's a good time. It's a good time. It's a fun time.
What are we reading next time?
What are we reading next time?
Castle of Otranto.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are reading the Castle of Otranto. We are on a bit of a gothic kick.
I'm excited. I'm excited because I haven't read this book before. So yeah, check it out and make sure to follow us on your podcast platform to never miss an episode. If you're listening to us on Spotify, you can now hit the little bell, and then you get notifications to your lock screen and on your watch and all these exciting things. So that's cool when a new episode drops. And yeah, give us a like or a review if you enjoyed this episode or other previous episodes. We really appreciate it a lot. And also you can find us on our socials, which are all linked below, as well as our Goodreads group, email, and many other places you can contact us on. So say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we'll see you next time. Bye!